UFC 291, Poirier versus Gaethje 2, the rematch. This weekend we have a great card taking place in Salt Lake City. Some are calling it the card of the year, but that remains to be seen. Today, however, I will be going over each of the fights on this card, providing my breakdown and predictions for each of the fights. And let's set it off right now with a couple of women's flyweights. We have Miranda Maverick taking on Priscila Cachoeira. Maverick is the heavy favorite at -280, with Cachoeira being +230. Maverick is 2-3 in her last 5 fights. Priscila is 4-1. This is an interesting matchup here. Maverick is a girl who's never been finished. Priscila is a woman who goes out and consistently finds finishes for basically all of her wins. Maverick's coming off of a loss to Vinicius, where she kind of got controlled a majority of the fight. That's a bit of a red flag, considering a lot of Maverick's MO as of recently has been the grappling department. And Vinicius is a good fighter who's surging in her own right as of late, but she's a girl who isn't really a natural grappler. I know she didn't grow up doing any sort of martial arts, so for her to control Maverick like she did, that's a bit concerning. Priscila, on the other hand, is coming off of a vicious KO versus Ariane Lipski, as well as another win over Jeon Kim. This line was a bit surprising to me. I know that Maverick was the favorite going into her last fight, so the betting public seems to be in her corner as of late. I'm liking the value we're getting out of Cachoeira here. Miranda isn't really on Gillian Robertson's level of grappling, and the last person to beat Priscila was Gillian Robertson by submission. So I don't really think that Maverick can follow the same keys to beating Cachoeira as Gillian Robertson did. So yeah, Cachoeira fights a little crazy. She can get reckless at times, but it works for her. She's had a lot of success as of recently. I think she's gonna notch another win onto her belt here versus Miranda Maverick. Next up is a welterweight fight between Matthew Semelsberger and Uros Medic. Semelsberger is the 2-1 favorite here. He's 3-2 in his last 5. Medic, on the other hand, is coming in at around +175. He's 4-1 in his last 5. This is the 170 debut for Uros. He's a guy who had a lot of power at 155, got a few KOs. So the question here is, how is that going to carry into 170? I think it will carry pretty well, but I don't see it comparing to the power of Semelsberger. Semelsberger is a guy who rocked Jeremiah Wells a few times in their last fight, and before that, we saw him put a beating onto Jake Matthews. Before then, he's a guy who's got a lot of power. Most of his offense is coming from straight punches down the pipe, and if he finds a home, he really hurts people. So I think it's a good matchup for Semi, because most of his losses have come against guys who have just out-grappled him. That's how he lost to Jeremiah Wells, because he really was getting the best of him on the feet. The grappling just is where he struggled. Uros isn't a guy who's going to go in there and grapple. I think Semi finds a KO in this one, spoiling Uros' return to the cage after a little over a year. So Semi by KO is going to be the pick. Next up after that is a men's flyweight fight between CJ Vergara and Vinicius Salvador. Vergara is the favorite in this one. He's 3-2 in his last 5. Salvador is coming in at +130. He's 1-1 in his last 2. Vinicius did miss weight by 3 pounds this morning. That's why I like filming these breakdowns after the weigh-ins, because I think there's a lot of information you can gather from those. But what the takeaway, I think, from missing weight is, I honestly am choosing to look at this as in Salvador's probably going to have more energy than he has had in his previous 2 fights where he did suck down to 125. or 126, the limit. Those 2 pounds, you'll see guys miss weight by 2 pounds in lightweight, welterweight, but at 125, I mean, that's just a larger percentage of your total body weight. That's really significant there. I think it's going to allow him to come into the fight bigger. Vergara is a savage for, taking the fight. Who knows if he really had any say in it. We had another fighter not accept the fight against an opponent who came in overweight, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Vergara is really tough dude. I think that's his biggest strength. Honestly, the guy can take a punch to give one, and he's not going to go down easy. He had got wobbled several times in his last fight versus Daniel Lacerda, but overcame that and ended up getting the win in that one. But I think Salvador is just really powerful, fights really long, and I think he's going to get a decision win in this one and then either get forced to move to bantamweight or Dana White is going to cut him. We will see. Next after that is the aforementioned fighter Jake Matthews. He's taking on Darius Flowers. Jake Matthews is the heavy favorite at -265. He's 3-2 in his last 5 fights. Darius Flowers is coming off of a Dana White Contender Series win and is making his official UFC debut tomorrow. Flowers did seal his UFC contract by getting a slam KO win in the Contender Series, but in my basically he slammed the guy and the guy dislocated his shoulder. In my expert opinion on shoulders, as someone who's popped theirs out several times, I'm guessing his opponent Gogoladze had some issues with shoulder stability going into that fight. Not to take too much away from Flowers, because that was impressive for him to, he was defending a triangle, picked the guy up and slammed him down, but I wouldn't really look at it as the same way you would look at like Rampage Jackson's classic KO, where he actually like Dave Bautista powerbombed the man through the cage damn near. So on the other hand, we have Jake Matthews, who's a guy who has had up and downs as of late, 3-2, like I said, but he's just got that UFC experience. If this most recent season of the Ultimate Fighter has taught us anything, it's that experience really is the #1 attribute you can have in this game. Just given how all the amateurs have struggled against the UFC experienced guys, I think Matthews gets a KO in this one. He's got fast hands, and Flowers really has not faced a guy near Matthews' level. But, Flowers does have that power always in his back pocket as well. So looking forward to that one. Speaking of power, we have, how about that transition? Not bad. We have a couple middleweights. Roman Kopylov is going to be taking on Claudio Ribeiro. Kopylov is the -240 favorite. He's 2-2 in the UFC, riding a 2-fight win streak. Claudio Ribeiro is 1-1 in the UFC and is a 2-1 underdog. Both of these guys are sluggers. They're really going in there to KO or be KO'd. The big difference, I think, is just in the striking skill of these two. Kopylov is really crisp in his striking. He throws, spinning back kicks, really clean punches, comes in at different angles. Ribeiro is more the guy who's just going to swing for the fences and hope he connects. And if he does, you're in trouble. I think you are getting value from Ribeiro here. I anticipate this being a slug match, and getting 2-1 in a fight like that, especially between middleweights where it doesn't take much for one guy to go down. I think that's good value there, but Kopylov is just, I think, the better guy, and I think he's going to win this fight more often than not. I think he finds a round 2 KO and starts flirting with that top 15 contention, top 15 ranking in the middleweight division. He could be a very interesting prospect with a win. Next up, we have a heavyweight fight between Derrick Lewis. We got the Black Beast. He's taking on Marcos Rodrigo de Lima. Derrick Lewis is the +170 underdog, largely in part to his 1-4 record in his last 5 fights. Really struggled as of late. De Lima is 4-1 in his last 5 on the other hand, but I think it's important to note who these guys are fighting. Lewis's losses are against Sergey Spivak, Tai Tuivasa, Cyril Gane, Pavlovich, and De Lima was fighting guys like Blagoy Ivanov, Andrei Arlovsky, and old Ben Rothwell. The caliber of opponents is really as far wide-ranging as you can get in the heavyweight division. On top of that, Derrick Lewis came in with a 6-pack, and that's really all I needed to see to take Lewis in this one. Was it a 6-pack, or was it just like his stomach fat rolling into convenient, 6 different pieces? We may never know, but he definitely was looking slimmer at the weigh-in. Both of these guys are 38 years old, and I think De Lima is just the kind of guy for Derrick Lewis to get another win against and keep his knockout record intact. Lewis by KO is going to be the pick here. I say he gets it done in round 2. Next up is a welterweight fight between Gabriel Bonfim and Trevin Giles. Bonfim is the -320 favorite in this one. He might be the largest favorite of the card, just about. No, not quite. But he is the second largest favorite on the card. He is undefeated in his career, 14-0. He's got 2 wins in the UFC, including the Dana White Contender Series. Trevin Giles, on the other hand, he's coming in at +265. He's 3-2 in his last 5. Has been in the UFC for much longer than Bonfim. And really what's standing out to me here is Bonfim and his brother, up until now, were kind of the package deal. They fought on the same card previously. Both got finishes. But UFC splits up the Bonfims. What happens? Ismail just lost as a -300 favorite to Olivier, the Frenchman, the 10-1 Frenchman, Olivier Marcin something. I can't really pronounce his name too well. But, I'm not liking that juju. I said before, if you're the UFC, you schedule the brothers on the same card. Why would you not? It's a cool talking point. I think it just hypes them up a bit. And the UFC didn't listen to me. Couldn't tell you why. And for that, I think we're taking Trevin Giles. Giles is really strong and athletic. He's won back-to-back fights here now, so he's got a little bit of momentum going into this. He's strong. He's pretty well-rounded. I think he just has to stay alert for the guillotines and some of the submissions. But Gabriel Bonfim, Trevin Giles could definitely be his best opponent to date. So Giles has a chance here to really give himself some stock moving forward. He took on Michael Morales and lost, so he's lost to prospects before, but I think this is an opportunity for him to get a win and cash as a pretty sizable underdog. And that is the prelim main event. Moving on to the main event, though, we have our first fight being Michael Chiesa taking on Kevin Holland. Chiesa is the +125 underdog here. He's 3-2 in his last 5. Kevin Holland, on the other hand, is 3-2 as well in his last 5, being a slight favorite at -145 or so. This is an interesting stylistic matchup. Chiesa is a guy who, what he's probably going to do. He's going to try and grapple and control Holland on the ground, maybe try and get a submission win. He's a guy who really does have some of the strongest grappling in the division. Almost notched a crazy submission versus Luque, ended up getting submitted himself, but he has lost 2 in a row. But Chiesa definitely, you know that you can rely on him to come in prepared. He's only going to take a fight if he's 100% ready, and he's a very psychological, heady fighter, good IQ. Holland, I think, is going to be a tough matchup for him, though. Holland's a guy who's a big welterweight. Most of his career spent at middleweight, where he struggled grappling some of those guys, but we've seen him have a lot more success grappling against 170ers. Had that fight versus Wonderboy where I genuinely believe he could have won it, pretty handily if he had engaged in grappling more. But you know, his ego and his showmanship kind of got in his way, and he just tried striking with Wonder Boy. Ended up breaking his hand in that fight, bouncing back against Ponzinibbio and winning with a hand that was still clearly bothering him, probably somewhat broken still. But I think Holland's hand is likely recovered by now. He's had a few more months, and he's a guy who's just super explosive. He's the younger of these two. I think Holland wins here by decision. Next up is a lightweight fight between Tony Ferguson and Bobby Green. Tony Ferguson is the plus 320 underdog. He is 0-5 in his last 5 fights, guys. It pains me to say he's such a a favorite among MMA fans, because he's just been such a dog throughout his career. Had one of the greatest win streaks, really in UFC history. His 12-fight win streak is up there with anyone's. With Anderson Silva's had the streak as well. Ferguson really was on another level in that that streak. He went on to win the interim lightweight championship. He's taking on Bobby Green, who is the 4-1 favorite in this one. He's 2-1 in his last 5 fights. And Bobby Green, you look at these two, and Bobby Green just, he's not showing nearly the wear and tear that we see from Tony Ferguson. Ferguson's a guy who's looked just exceptionally slow as of late. Got knocked out cold versus Michael Chandler. I had a buddy who was at the fight live. He said Ferguson was down for, like, no exaggeration, 5 minutes, just face down. Really scary stuff from him, being a guy who had never been knocked out up until that point, versus Michael Chandler. And really the big red flag for me are his knees. And if you're in the mood to cry, you watching this video, just watch the compilation of Tony Ferguson doing his signature knee slide, and you see in his most recent one versus Nate Diaz, his legs just don't allow him to do it anymore. So he's a guy who just pains me to say it, but is just not nearly on the same level that he was before, and just really doesn't seem to be on the same level as the guys that he's being put in there with. Bobby Green just has the speed advantage, the athleticism. I think he wins by unanimous decision in this fight. I saw this line come out as kind of almost a pick'em back in May. I was able to get the odds at -180 before they swelled, so I know there's going to be big money on Bobby Green here. Never can really count out Tony Ferguson, but I mean, just all signs are pointing to Bobby Green dominating this one. What would be next up is Wonder Boy versus Michel Pereira. I touched on this before, but Pereira missed weight, and the fight is off. This totally sucks. It would have been an electric fight. A fight that I probably would have taken Pereira. I would have taken Wonder Boy to win, even though I think Pereira is probably the more athletic, more explosive fighter between the two, who probably could have just grappled his way to a win, but just IQ-wise, I think Wonder Boy is just too smart and would have beat him. But yeah, it just didn't make sense for Wonder Boy to take this fight against a guy who missed weight and is ranked lower than you. I could honestly see Wonder Boy versus Kamaru Usman getting scheduled. It sounds crazy to say, but I don't really see who else he would fight. Shavkat doesn't really seem to make sense for Wonder Boy. I think Usman's the more winnable fight for them. I think Kamaru would probably rather take on Wonder Boy, and it's a better matchup for him, as well as I still think that it could be a big win for Kamaru to try and make one more run at regaining his title. So if that fight gets scheduled, you heard it here first. But in terms of Wonder Boy's fight tomorrow, it is off. Finally, we have our co-main event, a fight that some theorize could be for the title. I was certainly thinking that after Jamal Hill had his title, or relinquished his title, but no, this is still a 3-round fight. We have Alex Pereira taking on Jan Blachowicz. Pereira this is going to be an even line between these two, pretty much a pick 'em at -110. Pereira's 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He's 4-1 in the UFC altogether. Dude has already fought for the title twice, or fought in 2 title fights, and is probably on his way to getting a #1 contender spot if he gets a win here. So, you know, his trajectory is just ridiculous. Next, he's taking on Jan Blachowicz. Blachowicz coming off of a draw versus Ankalaev for the title, so neither of them took it home. He's 3-1-1 overall in his last 5 fights. He's a guy who had a rough start to his UFC career, but once he found his momentum, was just destroying everyone, showing off the Polish power. It really is Brazilian power versus Polish power here. Pereira's making his light heavyweight debut. He looks massive at 205, just like he looked massive at 185. He's going to have the length advantage between these two. And I would say that Pereira has the just power advantage on the feet. I don't know if there's too many people in the UFC who can hit as hard as him. Although Jan definitely can knock some heads as well. Jan's advantage here is going to come with more of his physical strength. I'm sure his blueprint is going to be similar to Izzy's, mixing the grappling with the striking, and once he gets on top, Pereira struggled getting Izzy from on top of him, so getting Jan's wide frame off of him from the bottom, I just don't really see that happening. So Jan's definitely going to look to wrestle here. The big thing for me also, I think, is that Jan loves using his leg kicks, and I think Pereira checks leg kicks as good as anyone. We saw it in the Izzy fight. He ended up hurting Izzy with a leg kick where he did, knock Izzy off of his feet. My mind is saying Jan's just a more well-rounded guy, that this is just a tough matchup for Pereira, but my heart's telling me that Pereira's just going to keep this incredible UFC career going with another title fight in his near future. Pereira by decision is going to be the pick here. I think he'll do enough just in terms of defending takedowns to keep the fight standing long enough to get his shots in, land some leg kicks, land some big shots on Jan, maybe stun him, but probably not KO Jan. So Alex by decision is going to be the pick here. He's had a few more months to train with Glover Teixeira. I think we're going to see that work pay off for him. And then finally, let me sit up for this one. We have our main event. It is the BMF title fight here. Whether you think it's corny or not, I'm not letting that affect my optimism and excitement for this fight at all. The idea of the BMF belt, yes, it is kind of corny, kind of cheesy, but these two guys, I think they sort of give it some credence, so I'm not even that mad at it. We have Poirier versus Justin Gaethje, though. Poirier is going to be the -150 favorite, with Gaethje coming in at +130. Poirier is 4-1 in his last 5, Gaethje being 3-2. Poirier won the first matchup between these two. This is the rematch. Poirier at that time had 18 UFC fights to Gaethje's 3 fights. That stood out to me a great deal because that UFC experience is pivotal. So Gaethje really did back in that day. Yeah, they're the same age, but Gaethje got thrust into this fight much earlier on into his UFC career. He earned that main event spot just for being exciting. Flash forward 5 years later, we have the rematch between both these guys. Throughout the week, both of them have talked about how they've evolved. Poirier, he's a guy who's he's got some of the best hands in the division. You can say the same about Gaethje. But I really think that Gaethje has evolved more between these two. Poirier kind of has a similar style as he's always had. And don't get me wrong, I think Gaethje is still the same exciting. You know, he'll take a bunch of risks when he wants to. He's going to throw all of himself into every punch he throws, but I do think in terms of his defensive ability, he's improved a lot. In the first fight, we saw him sort of stand in front of Poirier at times, and he was kind of stuck in the mud while Poirier would land longer combinations on him, and that's where a lot of Poirier's work was done. Of course, the first fight, Gaethje landed leg kicks, landed a bunch of leg kicks throughout the first 3.5, 4 rounds. Had Poirier really hurt. Gaethje himself even said that if that fight went further than 4 rounds, that Poirier was in deep trouble. So, and I think Poirier would agree with that as well. Of course, it didn't go to the 4th round, or didn't go past that point, because Poirier caught Gaethje with a counter left or right hand that just completely wobbled him and ended the fight. So, yeah, I think Gaethje is the more improved of these two guys going into this fight. Poirier, you know, yeah, he's going to come in with, you know, he's going to try and counter, put the pressure on Gaethje, even though no one really puts the pressure on Gaethje. I think Gaethje's had the more impressive wins as of late. McGregor is, obviously that's a big win versus McGregor, but Gaethje's got that win versus Fiziev most recently, the win versus Tony, when Tony was still, you know, the Tony of old. And Gaethje probably had the most success against Khabib as probably anyone else alive. And on top of that, Salt Lake City is at elevation, not quite as much as Denver, but that's going to benefit Gaethje a lot because he trains in Colorado throughout the year. He's going to have the bigger gas tank in this one, and I think that's going to do him a lot of good. I see these guys throwing haymakers. It's just not going the distance. There's no chance. But I think going into the third round, I think Gaethje's going to be the fresher guy and find the KO here. Gaethje is, you know, money's the biggest motivator. I think Poirier already has gotten that life-changing generational wealth in those 2 fights versus McGregor. Gaethje is still, I think, you know, he's still looking for that sort of success that Poirier has seen. I think he's going to be the more motivated guy, even though, you know, I don't expect anything but 100% out of Poirier. So Gaethje by KO is going to be the pick here. It's going to be a slugfest. It's going to be fireworks. I cannot wait. I hope you all enjoy the card, and I will be seeing you on the next one.